begin with a few kind of preliminary uh, things. First is I have a lot to say today, and I apologize. So please leave your questions until either the end or most likely the seminars, and please accept my apologies for saying that. I think there is going to be a lot of content, and it's probably going to be a bit all over the place. So I would also encourage you to maybe we'll record this, re-watch it later if you're really struggling. Okay. Okay. So I was thinking, I need to mute my phone. Speaking, I'm still harping on the same string, and I'm still trying to learn how to speak well within the context of real love. And I was thinking that I'm not convinced that I've made any progress. But maybe by the end of today, that will change. But I made the task even more difficult for myself because this week I've charged myself, at least in the syllabus, with speaking about the place of love within the Abrahamic religions, which are, as you most likely already know, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And then, as if that's not already too ambitious, I've also noted in the syllabus that somehow I would speak about all of that in relation to the concepts of doubt and certainty. That's the plan. But, with most plans, there's usually contingencies. So it occurred to me a couple days ago that some of you have already been studying these concepts, the concepts of doubt and certainty, in another class, because they were put to work by René Descartes. But I think we should be cautious about generalizing Descartes' particular conceptual configuration of doubt and certainty as if it were possible or relevant to all existing worlds. His conviction, which means his certainty, was resolutely anchored to a Christian worldview. Hence, other worldviews would seem to him to be like bad apples. His method was grounded in a prior conviction, a certainty that he retained and hence brought with him from the very beginning. And it seems to me that all certainties, when we're talking about certainty, they tend to operate precisely in this way, as if they were there already from the very beginning. Hence, a certainty touches eternity, which means in some sense, if it touches eternity, it cannot be put to an end. It doesn't end. Descartes' conviction was in the God of Christianity, and his method of doubt functioned only to uphold that conviction. That's my first critical point about Descartes, but I have a second. My second critical point concerns the way in which he uses the concept of love. For him, it's reduced to one of the elementary, what he calls passions of the soul. For him, there are 6 passions of the soul, which are, let's name them. There's hatred, there's love, there's wonder, there's desire, there's sadness, and there's joy. These are the 6: love, hatred, joy, sadness, desire, and wonder. All passions for him are reducible to these 6 in some restricted sense. They're also mutually exclusive passions. Well, in my view, as a person interested in psychoanalysis, I don't consider this to be a very well-informed distinction. Most likely because I build my world differently. I place the walls in my world different than Descartes. For example, Descartes opposes hatred to love. He makes them opposed to one another. And in doing this, I think he misses the point that not only are love and hatred not at all opposed to one another, but the real opposition to both love and hatred is indifference or ignorance. Like, look, okay, take a simple example. If you really want to give somebody the impression that you're over them, as a romantic partner, for example, just remain indifferent to them. Demonstrate a passion for ignorance. Take another example. I admit this is a really vulgar example. Please forgive me for it. It's a practice known in America, perhaps here as well, I don't know. It's a practice known as hate fucking. I don't know if you know it. It's called hate fucking. All one word. What's hate fucking? It occurs within the context of a romantic relationship. I did some preliminary research before today to make sure I'm not making this up, but it seems to me hate fucking is never conflated with rape. Not the same thing. Why? Unlike rape, hate fucking exists within the context of a relationship, within the world of your relationship. With hate fucking, there's a sense of a shared romantic world. It's not the case for rape, of course. So maybe you're in an argument with your romantic partner and you partake in this practice known as hate fucking. And I've read that apparently it's a very exhilarating experience, close to what some people call makeup sex. Well, we shouldn't try and judge these behaviors because we all enjoy our death drive in different ways. This point about the non-opposition of love and hatred, I think was introduced most forcefully by psychoanalysis. Freud, Sigmund Freud, and some around him, they discussed love and hatred as not being opposed. They used the concept ambivalence, which was later taken up as a key characteristic of a passion that occurs when you're depressed, when you suffer from melancholia. Ambivalence. You're ambivalent about perhaps your romantic partner or something like that. Lacan, whose name you're going to hear a lot of, he invented a French concept which brought together the words hatred, in French it's haine, H-A-I-N-E, haine, as in Duane, and love. He brought together these words, hatred or haine and love, amour, into the French neologism enamoration, H-A-I-N-A-M-O-U-R-A-T-I-O-N, enamoration, as one word. I'm not sure there's a equivalent Russian word. Maybe some of you could look into that for me. Let me know in the seminar if there's a word for hate loving. I think hate loving is the best English translation of enamoration, hate loving. But anyway, I was thinking about how I prefer, when my ego is not so fragile, and that's not often the case, but when my ego is not so fragile as a professor, supposedly, I was thinking about how I prefer when my students hate me, to loving me, or to being indifferent to me. Because the reason is that hatred provokes good work. When you're not agreeable with a person, then maybe you go about your day trying to prove that your professor's stupid. And it's not something I feel indifferent to. Whereas love can produce echoes, indifference or ignorance is often silent. Hatred really gets you to work. When you're silent, I presume you're indifferent. But the point is this, I think, when imaginary love becomes too real, capital R, real, when imaginary love becomes real love, which sometimes happens, it's possible that it transforms into hatred. Hate is a possible modality of real love. Hence, why love where you work can also mean hate where you work. As for Descartes, neither love nor hatred was the pathway to God for him. But to me, it seems pretty obvious he wasn't indifferent to God. I think because he wasn't prepared to hate his God, he was also not prepared to love his God. That's why the way to God for Descartes was through devotion. That's how Descartes put it. It's an interesting word because the root word of devotion is vow, as in, like a vow, a marriage vow. And it seems as though devotion is only possible within the context of a prior certainty. It's a certainty that remains fixed, such that it repeats, it endures in time, as if by necessity. I want to move to another conceptual pair, necessity and contingency. Descartes, I don't think, could identify necessity as being operative within his meditations, his discourse. He didn't recognize his certainty as necessary, as a necessity. I'll give you an example of this conceptual pair of necessity and contingency in love. It's a really banal example, everybody gives it. Suppose you're walking outside on the street, okay? You're walking, you accidentally bump into a person. I gave this example to Sophia the other day. It's an accident, which means it was a random occurrence. It was a random event to accidentally bump into this person, which means it was contingent. Let's suppose that you operate on the side of this contingency. You take responsibility for it. You remain in fidelity to it, such that you repeat it. You go on another date, and then another date. And maybe a year and a half later or something, you ask this person to marry you. In this case, haven't you retroactively proclaimed that you were always meant to marry her? From the very beginning. It was as if you were already married from the very beginning. Oh, we were always meant to meet, we were soulmates and so on. So what happened? You moved from contingency to necessity. This is how love seems to function. The future action of necessity occupies the prior moment of contingency, allowing the accident to repeat. You know, contingency is the seed, and necessity is eating it up, such that the seed of contingency becomes recognized as a certainty. Lacan said, I'm quoting him, "From contingency to necessity, there lies the point to which all love is attached." From contingency to necessity. Well, I think it's of interest to us today because there's another accident, another contingency. I'm speaking to you on Valentine's Day. It wasn't planned. It's all the more interesting to me, as we'll see, because it was Julie who made me realize this last night, that this contingency existed. It wasn't planned. So it was contingent, it was accidental, it's purely coincidental. What I want to do, nonetheless, is to demonstrate the necessity of this contingency. And that requires in some minimal sense, it requires that I try to speak well of this contingency. What is the Valentine's Day narrative? As I understand it, and I admit I might get it a little wrong, Saint Valentine, or I think his name's Valentinus, he was devoted to God, to the Christian God, and he was imprisoned for his devotion. It was forbidden for him to be marrying Christian couples, particularly soldiers, right? Because he existed in a context of paganism, in a sense. People were worshiping multiple gods. And when the pagans discovered, to put it simply, when the pagans discovered that he was secretly performing these marriages for couples who were in love, they put Valentinus in prison. What I tried to do the other day was I tried to find out if there were any explicit rules at this time against marrying Christians. And I couldn't find that there were. Maybe there were, I might just not have found them. So it seems as though it was an implicit rule rather than an explicit rule, but I don't know that for sure. But I think it makes a difference because if it's an explicit rule, you're prohibiting something. And it's not the same as living in a paganistic world where you permit the worship of particular somethings. To prohibit something is not the same as permitting only particular things. They seem to be the same, but they're not the same logic. In our contemporary period, particular enjoyments or particular existences are affirmed without any of the apparent prohibitions. It seems to me that there's nothing more romantic. It's just my point of view. There's nothing more romantic than marriage in an age of particular affirmations. Not in an age of prohibitions, it's quite conservative. When the world has given up on marriage, there's something romantic about marriage. It was a point that was made actually very well by a British author, a Christian author named G.K. Chesterton, who claimed that marriage becomes revolutionary in a period of conservative paganistic orgies and sexual excesses and so on. He says orgies, sexual excess and transgressions and so on is the conservative position in a world of paganistic enjoyment or whatever. So when our particular modes of affirmation, or sorry, of enjoyment are affirmed rather than prohibited, I think the function of marriage changes quite dramatically. I was even led to consider something that Emma Goldman, the Russian-Canadian anarchist, once purportedly said. There's no evidence she actually said this. You know, she said, if I can't dance, I don't want to be a part of your revolution. I think today that's a very conservative position. Instead, we should say something like, if I have to dance to your tune, it's not a revolution. You know, because I say this in other classes a lot, but I'll repeat it. There's this popular talk show host that I think is exemplary of contemporary ideology in America named Ellen DeGeneres. You can Google her. They have hours of her dancing, which is what she did on her television show every single day for years and years and years, dancing, even through her own mourning and melancholia and so on. She's dancing, and I can't imagine more suffering than that. But anyway, I have a lot of threads, forgive me. I return to the Valentine Day narrative. It's clear that Valentinus was led by an unshakable conviction. His vow endured, despite the consequences. You know, in other words, no prohibition upon his certainty, his enjoyment, no jail could stop him. Precisely because he couldn't do otherwise than remain in fidelity to his conviction, to his prior certainty. You know, it's really fashionable in experimental schools or liberal arts schools or whatever, philosophy programs now continental, to quote Michel Foucault, this famous philosopher who says, he talks about the contingency of history. He's like, our motto should be, it could have been otherwise, which is a statement of contingency. I think it's a position on the contingency of history. I think our revolutionary task today is the opposite. We shouldn't say it could have been otherwise. We should try to find the way in which it could not have been otherwise. The way in which the certainty repeats. Precisely because it wasn't contingent, we have made it necessary. Valentinus was fixed, like a person who is suffering from addictions. You know, you just can't get through to them. He's tragically repeating his death drive, which is his devotion to God. What happened next? While he's imprisoned, it's the emperor, I think, or the judge, I think the emperor, Rome, supposedly made him a promise or something like that. He said, like, okay, my daughter, she's blind. If you cure her blindness, I'll grant you anything you desire. Basically, something like this happened. Valentinus, now having performed this miracle, he was solicited by the emperor to state his wishes. And like any stupid person in love, and this is the tragedy of real love, he kept repeating himself. He requested, okay, destroy all your pagan idols in favor of embrace monotheism, embrace, in this case, Christianity, and so on. This is why Valentinus was killed, for this reason. Okay, I think there's clear structural similarities here between the Orpheus narrative and the Valentinus narrative. But some of you might be thinking, I imagine, oh, they're different because one was devoted to God, the other is devoted to Eurydice. These two devotions are not unrelated to one another, structurally speaking, psychoanalytically speaking. It's going to take me a moment or two to try and demonstrate this. The vow of love is always this tragedy concerning necessity. There's no cure for it, for real love. It's a responsibility that one takes upon oneself, that repeats, that endures, but it's a necessary vow, one that remains committed precisely, and this is the psychoanalytic point of view, to that which does not exist. This is where psychoanalytic tragedy departs, I think, from religious tragedy, from philosophical tragedy, and from, let's say, naive romanticism. Psychoanalysis begins from the place of inexistence, from that which does not exist. It's for this reason that the concept of the whole, H-O-L-E, is so important for psychoanalysis. And it's for this reason we cannot claim that Lacanian psychoanalysis, we might claim this about other forms, but Lacanian psychoanalysis is not phallocentric. Psychoanalysts are never those who claim to have the phallus. Never. You cannot be a psychoanalyst if you claim to have the phallus, or who circumambulate as if circumambulate is like a religious ritual around an altar, around the phallus. None of that, as if it's the center of the world or whatever. That's not Lacanian psychoanalysis. We build our walls differently. Our world revolves around a whole, something that's missing, the missing phallus. It revolves around the woman. Maybe we claim, okay, maybe we can claim that philosophy tends toward phallosophy, sophistry of the phallus. Religion tends toward fallacies, and psychoanalysts tend toward acephalus, which is a really fashionable expression I heard last night. I'm reminded of it now. Acephalus, you can Google it. Sounds like acephalus, but it's A-C-E, which means a place from which the phallus is missing. Okay, I went off on a crazy thread. I need to return to the other thread again. A vow is maybe a manner of speaking well regarding the whole, the impossible. Saint Valentine, he wrote a letter, and it was the first Valentine's Day card ever given to another person. It's a miracle she accepted it. And he passed it through the hole in his prison wall straight to the emperor's daughter, who he became acquainted with during the term of his imprisonment, who was on the other side of the wall. He signed the letter, "From your Valentine." It's purely coincidental that the recipient's name was Julie. Okay, there's no proof that this actually occurred, by the way, that this part of the narrative actually occurred. People repeat it, but people also repeat there's no proof. And I think there's no proof, which means there's no guarantee that it actually occurred, precisely because it didn't emerge from a place of existence. We repeat this devotional act today, which means that our world is organized around the loss of his world, the whole that exists there. Our world revolves around this inexistence. Valentinus died, such that the act of devotional love reveals itself, and here I'm going to lose some of you, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think it reveals itself as essentially the act of love as feminine. Okay, what do I mean by this? Well, when you share something other than what you believe yourself to possess, the phallus, then you assume the place of the whole. And that, at least according to Jacques Lamelaire, I shared an article with one of you, Sophia, during Professor in the Box, where Jacques Lamelaire says this. It means that, as Melaire puts it, love is, I'm quoting him, essentially feminine. He puts it like this, quote, "One only really," emphasis on the word really, "loves from a feminine position. Loving feminizes," end quote. That's why love can be quite emasculating and pathetic for a man, particularly. Okay, there's still a lot to say, so maybe I'll try and move a little faster. So I think there was a time when we weren't stupid enough to believe in the God or to believe in the woman. We weren't stupid enough. We believed in them precisely because we were idiots. Stupidity and idiocy are not the same forms of dupery. They're not the same ways to be duped. They're not the same positions, let's put it like that. The idiot, I think, this is my claim, I'm willing to revise it, I don't know. The idiot is a dupe of something like ideology. You know, the idiot is a dupe of his world. He's an idiot enough to believe that he or she is not implicated in the various determinations of his world. The idiot is like a prison, the idiot is imprisoned. Okay, the idiot is imprisoned, encased by these walls, but he's a dupe. He's an idiotic dupe precisely because he thinks he's free nonetheless. Total prisoner, but he thinks he's free. He's an idiot. We often believe we're free precisely because we don't see the walls that imprison us. Our life world therefore becomes an echo chamber, but we think we're having a conversation. Maybe this is why the prisoner is actually something like a pioneer. Because the prisoner is maybe the only one who's capable of moving out of the position of idiocy. You know, he knows he's in a prison. He sees freedom out the wall. He knows it. The prisoner knows freedom very well. You know, there's even a Russian author, you all know him better than I do, Dostoevsky, who, despite his protestations, I would say, wasn't an idiot. He had a really similar view of prisons. You know, he saw imprisonment, I would say, as necessary. It was a necessity for him. I'm remembering that last quarter, I was talking to people in the Masters of Experimental Education course, and I blurted out the statement that I really like, and I've been repeating it ever since. I said, okay, I'm stupid, but I'm not an idiot. And I've realized that I've been repeating it because I think it's a really nice formulation. Stupidity requires something different. It's a different position than idiocy. Stupidity requires that you be filled with something like an uncommon wonder. That you accept that there's no cure for your endless stupidity. Okay, I need to take a break and think for a second. One second. Okay, so what is to be done, to quote Lenin? What is to be done? Well, I think you need to do what's necessary. You have to organize, you have to have the world organize itself around your stupidity. It's not easy. I'm still working on it. Thank God for the School of Advanced Studies and for people like Andre and Julie. I also realized, by the way, that our logo, I realized this a couple days ago, our logo looks like prison bars, the three bars, which means that we're not idiots here either, necessarily. So to do what is necessary requires, as Lacan once put it, that you, I'm quoting him, I can't tell you where he said this, I'll have to look it up. It requires that you nourish your stupidity. You must nourish your stupidity. A stupid person is sometimes capable of building a world for himself with whatever magic is left inside of him. He makes use of walls. An idiot, on the other hand, remains within his existing world, imprisoned by it. He believes he's outside of the prison, you know, outside of the prison cell, looking in. That's what he thinks. And he doesn't realize something like maybe there's a cold Siberian winter coming and the people in the prison are free because they have warmth, they have food, and so on. In fact, this is even something, I used to be homeless years ago. In my first 2 years of university, I was homeless and all my friends were homeless people and so on. And I remember very well that they knew how to survive the Canadian winters. You know what they did? They would partake in a minor crime like shoplifting or something so that they could deliberately put themselves in prison to be warm and have food and so on. They saw it as a luxury. You stay outside, you freeze to death or starve. Okay, Winston Churchill, who's, again, unfortunately not much of an idiot, former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, he once claimed that he wasn't an alcoholic because alcohol took more out of him than he took that he took more out of alcohol than alcohol took out of him. Here, I like this because it means that the repetition of death wasn't driving him. When we talk about death drive, death wasn't driving him, he was driving death. It's a different position. Again, I keep losing my thread. Let me go back to my thread. Lacan's claim was, I'm quoting him, the woman is another name of God. The woman is another name of, I would say, the God. And it is in this respect that she doesn't exist, end quote. The woman is another name of God, and it is in this respect that she doesn't exist. So psychoanalytically speaking, the inexistence of the woman is also a manner of stating God's inexistence. In other words, it concerns the inexistence of what in my first lecture I called the big other, with a capital O. The big other doesn't exist. Real love obligates us to learn how to speak well concerning this, that which does not exist, which makes us responsible, like a little prince for what he tames. Okay, but what is the preliminary gesture of devotion in love? It's falling to your knees. You know, it's only from your knees that you can make a vow. There's even a reason why we fall to our knees, why a man falls to his knees when he's stupid enough to fall in love. An idiotic and confident smile I don't think it's appropriate to the occasion. Love is not a triumph. It's not a positive project. When you're stupid enough to fall in love, you fall to your knees like a person screaming or crying in intense pain, a person who's injured. You know, like there's nothing more pathetic and yet necessary than a man who's trembling and crying down on his knees. It's emasculating. It's even like a wonder why any heterosexual woman would ever accept a pathetic gesture like that. It's a miracle that they do. Okay, you also take a knee when you pray. But how you do that depends upon your religious worldview. It depends upon how the walls are built that uphold your religious world. So don't imagine, you know, like an idiot, that as an atheist, you've somehow found a way to avoid taking a knee. I think that's an idiotic position. You know, you've merely taken your you've merely taken your knees and you've merely taken your legs as knees, or you don't realize that your knees are legs. You're walking around on your knees. It's a bad analogy. Psychoanalysis demonstrates that you actually need a really serious commitment to become an atheist. It's not that easy. Look, who was the ultimate atheist of history? It was the Jesus of Christianity, was the ultimate atheist of history. G.K. Chesterton claimed that when God descended into his world, you know, taking on the image of man, his devotion brought him precisely to atheism. Jesus and God became atheists precisely so that they could uphold a world for themselves. Like the penultimate moment, which is cited very frequently by Slavoj Žižek, it was so convincing that even Jordan Peterson, if you've heard of him, was persuaded by the argument. And Jordan Peterson's a person of faith. The penultimate moment of atheism occurred within Christianity when Jesus was on the cross questioning what? His own existence. He's on the cross and he says, I don't know why I'm enacting it. He was on the cross and he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? You could see it as a moment of radical doubt. You could. But it exposed the necessary domain of his prior certainty. Who did he think he was speaking to when he became an atheist? When he lost his faith, who was he speaking to if not God? That he nonetheless still believed in, but he didn't see it as necessary yet. This is why I think resurrection is not rebirth. You know, it's a movement from contingency to necessity. It's a movement toward a prior certainty. Okay, it brings me to a crucial problem, and it's what I'm still kind of working through. There was a time when I was a kid. I remember I was quite young, and I remember atheists used to think they were very radical and clever when they would question their friends. They would say, "Oh, but how can you believe in the existence of God?" This is what they would say. Who did they think they were talking to, if not a figure of the big other? The problem is much more complicated today, specifically. Because today's atheists, I think, they don't ask how somebody can possibly believe in the existence of God. They don't realize what they're really asking is, how is it that God can possibly doubt our existence? Why is it that God doubts us? Why is it that the big other doubts us? They don't realize they're saying this, but it's clear that God doubts their existence today. It's the atheists who are certain. God doubts their certainty. God stopped believing in them. It's a point that made me reflect on a psychoanalytic joke. Julie knows this joke all too well. Sorry for repeating. That's repeated frequently by Slavoj Žižek and also his followers. I'll give you the simplest version, shortest version. It's not going to make you laugh. A man cries for help from his psychoanalyst. He says, help me, I'm a seed. There's a giant chicken trying to eat me." After months of analysis, he's laying on the couch, the psychoanalyst going, At the end, he's cured. But he returns not long after. He says, help me. The analyst says, wait a minute, I thought I cured you. You don't believe yourself anymore to be a seed. The man responds, I know that, you idiot. The chicken doesn't know it. Okay, it's a really stupid joke to discuss, to sort of demonstrate what the big other is, what the unconscious is, and analogously God. What's the structure of the joke, though, ultimately? The man was brought to the point of doubting that he himself was a seed. He didn't believe in his existence as a seed anymore. But it revealed his prior unconscious certainty that there does exist a chicken who still believes it. So the man is doubting, but the chicken, as the figure of the big other, remains certain, remains convinced with the conviction. I was thinking, we got to stop repeating this joke, because I'm not sure this is the problem we're facing today anymore. I can imagine a man rushing to his psychoanalyst. I can't even imagine that if I'm being honest anymore, but let's presume we can possibly imagine somebody rushing to their psychoanalyst for help, saying, I'm a seed. And then the psychoanalyst has the audacity to try and cure him. The man simply cancels the psychoanalyst for daring to try to cure him, accusing him of being seed phobic. Oh, you're seed phobic. You don't believe in my existence. The man already knows with certainty that he is a seed. He exists as a seed. So who are you as a psychoanalyst to doubt that? The problem isn't that the chicken doesn't know it. It's that we, as seeds, each one of us, we know everything concerning our existence today. So what can the psychoanalyst possibly do except affirm the existence of seeds? You are the seed that you claim yourself to be. It's something important to note also about the existence of psychoanalysts. Love is not a victory march. That's Leonard Cohen. Incidentally, I'm just going to go on a small tangent. Love is not a victory march. You know that, how many of you, if you do, just put your hand up. How many of you have heard this song, Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen? Thanks. It's the, I nearly said eulogy, which sounds like Yulia. Eulogy, I nearly said eulogy, which you say at a funeral. It should be a eulogy. It's a real declaration of love in this sense. Love is a eulogy. Because I put it at the, epigraph of my book on real love. But love is not a victory march. You know what's interesting about this? Churches all around the world and places of worship, you go to YouTube, everybody's singing this song as if it's some big positive, triumphant song. He's saying it's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah. And you see the choir boys out in the Catholic churches singing it with smiles on their faces and so on. What is this? Anyway, sorry to go on that long tangent. The problem is, who actually believes today that psychoanalysts exist? That's the problem. I think if it's okay with you, I'd like to just take a, let's say a 3-minute break, hold your questions. I drank way too much coffee. I need to go to the restroom. So 3 minutes, and then we'll come right back. Thank you. Thanks, folks. I love that song too. It's my favorite song. I first heard it in Moscow. I was wandering through Moscow and I heard it. I had to use Songzilla, and Songzilla, is that what it's called? Songzilla couldn't find the name of the song. And then like a week later, I was walking to meet Julie for coffee, and all of a sudden I got a notification that it found the song retroactively. Like somehow a week later, what was it, searching for a week? And then I discovered it and I've been obsessed with it ever since. And the story of what happened with her in the Soviet Union. Okay, so where were we? Oh yeah, the existence of psychoanalysts. Like the question I was trying to ask is, who actually believes that psychoanalysts exist? It's a real question. None of us believe in the power of our psychoanalysts today, first off, any more than we believe in, I mean, this was the postmodern condition. We don't believe in our professors, and we don't believe in our courts, our presidents, and so on anymore. It's a product of the postmodern condition. But there is a paradoxical belief that's still to be found, precisely in those who cling to what I call, paradoxically, because I'm turning the phrase around a bit, those who cling to Lacanian ideology. Lacanian ideology occurs when you're idiotic enough to believe that psychoanalysts still exist. And you believe somehow that through their transphobia or their authoritarian tendencies and so on, somehow they're trying to eat up and devour all of the political activists or other Lacanians. It's an analogy I'm going to run with a bit. It's something you can find today in some Lacanian circles. For example, I was really puzzled by a quote that I have in front of me here from Slavoj Žižek that he wrote recently, it was published a few months ago, I think. I'm quoting him. Take it slow. To paraphrase Lacan's famous statement that a madman, a psychotic, a madman, is not only a beggar who thinks he's a king, but also a king who thinks he's a king. A madman is also an analyst who thinks he's an analyst. And this is how analysts tend to act outside the strict clinical setting in their organization. One should go to the end in this direction. Are there analysts at all? End quote. It's a really strange claim from my friend Slavoj. Imagine, for example, imagine for a moment that you're looking in on a patient and his or her psychoanalyst or their psychoanalyst. Okay, where does the psychoanalyst sit? First up, he sits behind the patient, out of view, out of the gaze, out of the sight of the patient, behind the patient. So why not call the patient Orpheus? It means that the psychoanalyst is Eurydice, out of view. Eurydice doesn't exist any more than a psychoanalyst exists. To exist is to share the same world, to be within the same walls, and yet it's not clear that the psychoanalyst exists in the same world. That's why we feel tempted often when we're patients and our psychoanalysts are behind us. Sometimes we get paranoid and we look back to make sure they're listening or they're there. You know, it's looking back in this moment. Who knows what happens? In fact, there's a funny joke. It's not funny. You're not going to laugh, but it's a joke that's repeated by psychoanalysts about this. The joke is like, there's one man who's been going to a psychoanalyst for years and years. He lays on the couch, and after 45 minutes, he sits up. He says, "Wow, that was such a great session." He turns around, his psychoanalyst is on the floor behind him, dead. You know, this is like, it's a good analysis when the psychoanalyst is somehow completely silent, doesn't interrupt. Okay, let's move forward. Each of the Abrahamic religions upholds a world for itself, in each its own singular way, precisely in relation to atheism. Let's go through them. Sorry, Julie, I know you've heard me say this a million times, but I'll say it in a more idiotic way. In Judaism, you can be an atheist, but only if you're first of all within the Jewish world. It's very well known. Like my atheist Jewish friends, they often go to the synagogue. They're still a part of the Judaic world. There's many atheists who maintain that they're still Jewish, but you have to be a Jew first. So it's a matter of chronology. First, you must be among the world of believers. Next, atheism is permitted chronologically. Okay, Christianity, what happens? Atheism's chronologically in the middle. So you begin with an idiotic belief in God, an untested belief like Descartes, for example, and then through some radically atheist method of doubting these beliefs or something, you emerge on the other side resurrected with a more certain belief. You arrive at the belief you already had, but this time you locate it as more certain. Okay, Islam. We can do Hinduism too, but let's try and keep this short. In Islam, we'll just do the Abrahamic religions. Atheism's permitted in Islam. Now, some of you are thinking, no, that's not true. You're talking to a person who has a lot of experience with this. It's permitted, but only paradoxically in the past. You're permitted to be an atheist before reverting. They use the word revert, not convert, and there's a reason for that. We can talk about it in the seminar if you want. You're permitted to be an atheist in the past before you revert to the religion, on the condition that you never again return to the atheist position. You know, even the Shahada, I'm quoting Dr. Zakir Nayak, who I posted the videos of, excuse me, online. Even the Shahada, which is a statement of faith, begins with a declaration of atheism. I'm not saying anything blasphemous here. I mean, in some sense, the biggest Islamic scholar in the world today, Zakir Nayak, he even takes it further than what I'm saying. He says atheists are closer to Islam than Christians. Because of the Shahada, you begin first, there is no God. Statement of atheism. But God, and the Prophet Muhammad is his messenger. So you move to the statement of faith, which retroactively forecloses the moment of atheism. It's as if atheism never existed at this point. So to summarize the chronology, Judaism permits atheism, yes, but only at the end. Christianity permits atheism, yes, but only in the middle on the way to a more certain belief. And Islam permits atheism, but only in the past, provided you never again go back or speak of it or whatever. Okay, but the point of all of this is just to try and demonstrate to you that we can't be so quick of generalizing a particular method of radical doubt, since it would deny the existence of other possible religious worlds where they doubt and they're certain in different ways. In Christianity, I'm going to try and develop that a little bit for you. In Christianity, for example, there are two golden rules. Forget about the 10 Commandments for now. There are two golden rules. What are they? I think they come from the New Testament book of Matthew. One, there's no love thy God. You must love. There's the love of God, and that which means the love of the big other, the love of the world, the love of the universal, whatever. That's one. Two, love thy neighbor as thyself. There's love for one's neighbors, precisely within the world. You love those within the world. So do you have this vertical love, which is love of the universal, and you have this horizontal love, which is the love in the world. So you love the world. There's a love of the world vertically, and there's a love in the world horizontally. So the vertical and the horizontal come together into a common project, forming the cross in some sense. What's at stake, though, in the horizontal project of Christianity? Take another statement from the Bible. New Testament, mostly I'm trying to extract from, but it's render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. I don't know if you know this. It's an important passage, and you can find many others like it, but it's an important passage because I claim it locates a space of hedonistic enjoyment or secularism within Christianity, within the world of Christianity. This is why we can claim that secularism, which is a political project, is ultimately a Christian project. And why perhaps the West, it's usually the West, usually says secular Islam, or they'll say political Islam, which is a contradiction in terms, in my opinion. I can't speak for everybody. Political Islam is a contradiction in terms. I can't develop this as much as I'd like to, but it is in my book if any of you are interested in why I claim that political Islam is a contradiction in terms. It's a Western conceptualization of Islam in my perspective. So there's no core love thy neighbor as thyself or render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's within the Quran. You can find little passages in the Hadith. Some of these, it's a question of which is the authority, what is the authority in the Hadith. But in the Quran, there's no love thy neighbor as thyself. As far as I can tell, I went looking. I've read the Quran many times. It has implications for what we call Islamic politics. It has implications for the Islamic world of love. Take it at a really basic level. This is an example I gave spontaneously in an interview that Julie did with me for her YouTube channel. I'm going to give you a dirtier, quicker version of it. What happens to Christian lovers basically? Like, how do they remain together after they have a major argument that should have broken them apart? Take it at a really basic level. They basically, I think what they say, can't generalize this so much, it's just an example, but basically they say, okay, we fundamentally disagree. Let's not have it destroy relations. Let's agree to disagree. Let's agree to disagree. That's a secular statement to hold the social bond together. It can be a way to maintain a social bond when belief in the relationship itself is fundamentally doubted. Christianity introduces secular love, I claim. It doesn't require that you horizontally believe in the same world as one's partner, but it does require that your lover, your romantic partner, whatever, shares the same conviction as you in secular love. They have to agree with you that you will agree to disagree. They agree to agree to disagree. It's very cunning, clever logic. So you must agree to disagree. Islamic lovers, and this is how it also has implications for interfaith dialogues and so on. Islamic lovers, maybe what they do, again, I'm generalizing to the extreme, but they affirm a common certainty. It's a different point of departure, a minimal point of agreement. There's no injunction to love thy neighbor, but there's an injunction in the Quran, quoted, "O people of the book, we must come to common terms." We must come to common terms. It means you have to find a minimal point of certain agreement. So in my work, I've claimed that this is the central ethical injunction of the Quran. So you find a point of minimal, when your relationship is fundamentally, the social bond is fundamentally about to fall apart, maybe you don't say, let's agree to disagree. You say, okay, let's find a point of minimal common departure. Like, look, we both love each other. We both agree with that. Let's begin there. Or look, we're both Muslims, so let's begin there. Or if it's an interfaith dialogue, look, we all agree that Abraham is a point of departure for discussions. We all agree at the level of Abraham. It's what happens after Abraham, maybe, that we start to have disagreements. So let's go to a point of agreement. Let's start there. Whereas Christians will say, well, we don't agree with your prophet, but you can be a part of our community. It's a different position. So Christianity includes doubt within the world. Islam places the function of doubt for upholding the world outside of the world, outside of the ummah, the religious community. It's the other who doubts. Maybe it's your prior self. You were an atheist before, you doubted before, but now that self is other, radically other to you, outside of our community. You're permitted to doubt, yes, but only outside of what later becomes rectified, such that you can never fundamentally doubt that again. When you're provided clear evidence, scriptural evidence, for example, then doubt becomes a very heavy sin. It's a retroactive erasure of prior doubt in the service of certainty. That's how I read it. So the certainty doesn't have to be repeated necessarily, as it does for Descartes. It's doubt that needs to be avoided. So doubt becomes externalized. You outsource doubt onto the other. The other doubts you. In this way, it's like a pressure that's felt against the walls of your world from outside. It's an external threat to the internal certainty of the group. I'll give you another example because I realize what I'm saying may sound a little confusing. Christianity, what often happens in Christianity, it tends to function through the explicit proliferation of sectarian divisions. It's like nobody even tries to hide that, okay, we have disagreements, we have to form our own sectarian division from the overarching church or religion or whatever. Sectarian divisions in Christianity are very welcome, in a sense. Islam explicitly attempts to avoid sectarian divisions, but paradoxically, T.S. Eliot, for example, Christian, he claimed that the function of sectarianism within Christianity is to retain and renew the prior certainty of the religion. You create a sectarian split from the overarching group precisely to uphold the overarching convictions. That's why Christians keep producing more and more sects. But in Islam, the biggest movement that I think we've seen, that some people call a political movement, is it's debatable, Salafi. I don't know if you know it, Salafi, which is a modern movement, but doesn't claim its roots in the modern period. It's a paradoxical sectarian division. Paradoxical because it doesn't claim itself to be sectarian. They don't claim that they are performing a sectarian division, the Salafis, or even the Wahhabis or any. They claim that the others are promoting sectarianism, so they need to defend the orthodoxy. Go back to the Prophet and the companions and so on. So they are defending the true orthodoxy. So the claim is often, if you talk to a lot of Muslims, as I have, I lived in the Middle East and so on, the claim is often that there are no distinctions in Islam. They'll say Sunni, Shiite, Sufi, these names don't matter, we're all Muslim. The problem is the others don't see that. They think that there are divisions. Oh, why do they keep trying to divide us? We need to divide in order to promote non-division. It's this sort of thinking. So they insist they're all Muslims. The problem is that the other doesn't see that. They doubt it. So you see, there's chickens and there's seeds everywhere. This is the point. How much time do we have? Okay. This is the point I wanted to bring all of you today. And thank you for enduring through it. I actually went much faster than I planned, but I have one or two tiny things I still want to say. I wanted to bring you to a point where we can no longer easily produce a general theory of certainty and doubt as if it upholds all worlds. It's clear to me that the Western world is now, in some sense, surrounded by chickens who doubt their existence. Just look at the Ukrainian conflict. We are, without a doubt, seeds. We are these seeds. And nobody can or has the right to claim otherwise. And when you think you're a seed, it's only natural for you to continue to believe that a chicken is trying to eat you. That's the price you pay for your seedy existence. As for me, and I say this only for the benefit of Julie, who will be the only person who understands it, I don't personally feel surrounded by chickens, personally, who are trying to eat me, because it just so happens that I have an eating disorder, and it seems like I can only eat chickens, almost exclusively. But the point is this: psychoanalysis builds a world for itself from the place of inexistence. The whole persists, and it's a question of how to organize a world when the whole persists. It means that psychoanalysis is distinguished from philosophy, from religious fallacies, and from naive romanticism. Okay, so I've had a lot of loose threads today. What I want to do now is try and tie them into a knot. I'm going to try and tie the knot. A wedding ring, perhaps one way to organize a social bond. I think it's a way. And if you look at a ring, it's got a hole. Yeah, and you pass through the hole. If marriage is reciprocal dupery, if you're stupid enough to fall in love and to risk it all because it's necessary, then maybe you have advanced beyond the idiots, I would say. And maybe that is progress.